The Minnesota Vikings still controlled their own destiny after throttling the Chicago Bears 30 to 12 on Monday Night Football. The Vikings record is now 12 and 2, which is tied with the Detroit Lions, and it's all good things because in a game where the Minnesota Vikings didn't play their best ball. This is my takeaway number one. The Vikings did not play their best ball, and they did not look as sharp as they had in recent weeks. Sam Darnold was not clicking on all cylinders. He was missing throws in the first and second halves that he typically makes. The interception doesn't bother me. I saw someone put out that it was a bad interception. In my mind, I'm like, how is that a bad interception? It was 4th and 3. I'd rather have him throw it up for a prayer than take a sack. So the interception didn't bother me at all. It was just a part of the play. It's a broken play. Had to get rid of the ball to give his team a chance at a first down on a 4th and 3. But you could see that the offense just wasn't quite clicking like it had been. Darnold just wasn't quite as accurate as he's had been. But at the end of the day, the Vikings still won 30 to 12. So it's easy to sit up here and be critical of just a few mistakes the Minnesota Vikings made offensively. Justin Jefferson drop, the execution on 4th and 3, Sam Darnold missing a couple throws, the false starts on Cam Robinson. You can go down the list. There was a lot of poor execution offensively in this football game. But at the end of the day, the Minnesota Vikings still put up 30 points on the Chicago Bears. So I've also got to be hesitant with my slight criticism because if you put up 30 points against anybody in the NFL, that certainly should be enough points to win any football game. And especially with the way the Vikings defense has played this year, that's certainly going to be enough to beat almost anybody. So the fact that they still put up 30 points in a struggling effort is amazing to me because Jefferson dropped it. Darnold wasn't as accurate. The running game actually picked up quite a bit, which was exciting. Aaron Jones ran in for a touchdown. Cam Akers ran in for a touchdown. Aaron Jones, 18 carries on 86 yards. Cam Akers, 10 carries on 24 yards. And it seemed like in the first half, I think there was a tweet out there that said Darnold threw the ball 24 times. So in the second half, he only threw it 16 times. And the Minnesota Vikings relied heavily on their rushing attack, which was nice. It was nice to be able to have that in the arsenal because we haven't necessarily seen an elite rushing attack this season. Aaron Jones has had games where he's shown flashes of being able to carry the offensive load, but this game he really did. And he ran for 86 yards. It's not all that flashy, but it was important because it allowed the Minnesota Vikings offense to have multiple areas of explosiveness, and especially in a game where Sam Darnold and Justin Jefferson were not clicking on all cylinders, it was nice to go into the back pocket and rely on the running game for a stretch. So that was nice. Kevin Seifert even tweeted, this might be Sam Darnold's least accurate passing game of the season. A lot of balls flying past wide receivers. He's an insider on ESPN for the Minnesota Vikings. So it's one of those things where he just wasn't quite as sharp as he typically was in this football game. So that's takeaway number one. Number two, Sam Darnold, I think this morning we should be very fortunate as Minnesota Vikings fans that he did not break a finger in his throwing hand. It just happened to Jalen Hurts recently. It happens to players all the time. How many times did you see Sam Darnold make a throw? And this isn't anyone's fault, but it's just a fortunate break for the Minnesota Vikings. How many times did you see Sam Darnold throw the ball, and on instant replay, it showed his finger colliding with either a defensive player's hand, trying to bat the ball down, or an offensive lineman's helmet? because it happened several times in that football game. And someone tweeted, I don't know who it was, probably Kevin Seifert, but someone mentioned that the trainer was following Sam Darnold to the locker room at halftime. And whether that be coincidence or whether that just be happenstance, it was something that happened. And it was something that an insider noticed on the Minnesota Vikings. So the fact that that happened might have been a sign that, you know what, his finger was bothering him. And when you put together the details of this game and you realize why or how Sam Darnold was so inaccurate throughout this game, maybe it was because his finger was bothering him. But if he didn't break his finger, and it appears that he didn't because he played the entire game and he didn't come out, even when the Vikings were up by a zillion, he still stayed in the game. So that's a good sign. But we are very fortunate this morning that Sam Darnold, the quarterback that has led the Minnesota Vikings to a 12-2 record, does not have a long-term sustained injury to one of his throwing fingers. Because it's not like his offhand, where it's like, okay, it's his offhand, he can do a little something like that with like Jalen Hurts. You break one of your fingers on your throwing hand, and there's no way you can play. There's no way you can hold on to the football. So Sam Darnold's health is paramount right now, and the fact that he did not get injured, despite the positions that his hand was in, is a very fortunate break for the Minnesota Vikings organization and Minnesota Vikings fans in general. Sam Darnold made some comments after the football game. He said, "Felt like we didn't play exactly like we wanted to on offense tonight, but we got the job done." Exactly what I was saying. Jefferson drop, a few Darnold incompletions that he typically makes. It just wasn't quite as sharp as they typically are. They still put up 30. So the fact that they could have put up 50, maybe 40, on a Chicago Bears team that's basically giving it to you. Coming into this game, I had no doubt that the Vikings would blow out the Bears. I said it yesterday on the podcast because the Bears are playing for nothing. They just got eliminated from the playoffs. Their interim head coach, Thomas something, has no idea what he's doing. And you could see it throughout the football game. He has no idea what he's doing. He's in over his skis. He's in over his head. And you know what? Bears got eliminated. Vikings are still playing for a division title and the number 1 seed. The ingredients are there for an absolute blowout. And it's exactly what happened. Vikings blew out the Bears by 18 points, 130-12. So that's takeaway number 2. Takeaway number 3. How can you not focus on just how good the Minnesota Vikings defense was and just look at statistically and think about big plays in that game? They were awesome from beginning to end. You take a look at this stat here, and this stat really shows a lot about the Minnesota Vikings defense. At the end of the first half, I'm looking for it here, the Minnesota Vikings defense did not give up a third down conversion. This was posted by Vikings Communications on X. And it says, for the first time since week 15 of the 2017 season versus Cincinnati, the Vikings held their opponents scoreless and without a third down conversion in the first half of a game, minimum of 5 attempts. So the fact that the Minnesota Vikings defense shut out the Bears in the first half, they locked them down on 2 short fourth down conversions, which set up the Minnesota Vikings offense nicely, was huge. And it really gave the Minnesota Vikings offense a little cushion in a game where they weren't playing to their standards of play. So it was cool to see the Minnesota Vikings step up again and completely dominate Caleb Williams, strip sack by Jonathan Greenard, who had some hilarious comments following this football game. Jonathan Greenard tonight in the Minnesota Vikings locker room. Take a look at this quote. I'm going to share the screen with you and I'll read it to the podcast listeners. I tell everybody that a strip sack is the best feeling in the world. Sorry to my wife, by the way. And the follow-up question, do you really mean that? And then Grenard says, 100%. She knows. He might have been sleeping on the couch that night. Well, I guess he said that she knows, but do you really admit that publicly? That's a tough situation to admit to your wife. Anyways, hilarious comment, spectacular play from Grenard, and the Minnesota Vikings offense completely flummoxed Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams, 18 for 31, 191 yards, and just was not playing well. Had one touchdown, 0 picks, but the Minnesota Vikings won 30-12, and it didn't even seem that close. It just felt like an absolute beatdown from beginning to end, and the Minnesota Vikings are 12-2. All right, that was, one second here. My last takeaway from the Minnesota Vikings victory over the Chicago Bears is that Caleb Williams right now has a lot to improve upon. Now, his situation isn't great in terms of who's calling his plays and the head coach and just the dysfunction within the organization. But at the same time, he's got Keenan Allen, he's got Rome Odunze, he's got Komet out there. Those are solid offensive weapons if you're a rookie quarterback in the NFL. And that's why so many people had the Bears as an underdog, surprising team that would potentially win the NFC North or make a wild card team. And this is my fourth takeaway because I want the first three to be about the Minnesota Vikings. But you can't help but think about just how bad Caleb Williams was in that game. Missing wide receivers left and right. And here's the problem with Caleb Williams this game. For the most part, he was making the right reads. And looking at the wide receiver that was open, he was just missing him with accuracy. And as I was thinking about this, personally, I would rather have a quarterback be a super accurate quarterback and just make the wrong read. Because you can adjust those things and you can look at the tape and talk to your coaches and figure out where the right throw should go. Versus make the right read and make poor passes towards that wide receiver. We saw so many times Caleb Williams overthrow Keenan Allen here. Not accurate throw to Keenan Allen there. He was not good in this football game. And the statistics, it wasn't great. It's 18 for 31, 191 yards, 1 touchdown, 0 picks. It does not demonstrate just how poorly he played in this football game. Because, sure, the Minnesota Vikings defense does this to everybody. And, they really, play well basically against every opponent this year. There's only 2 games. The Rams and the Lions this year they weren't spectacular, but other than that, they've been dominant almost every single game. But he was not good. And when he had time, he was overthrowing, underthrowing, side throwing. He has got a long way to go for the Chicago Bears to be an elite team. And you look at other quarterbacks in the league that are in a similar state as him. Bo Nix, they're going to be a playoff team. Jaden Daniels looks like they're going to be a playoff team. So you think about 2 other rookie quarterbacks that are playing right now that have their team in the playoff hunt and are most likely going to make the playoffs. And here's Caleb Williams missing wide receivers left and right. It's not looking good. And he has got a lot to learn. And of course, I'm sure the Chicago Bears are going to look at bringing in an offensive-minded head coach. Or maybe they won't if they're really that stupid. But the Chicago Bears and Caleb Williams have a lot to figure out here. And I talked a little bit about their interim head coach being over his head. And he is. You think about the play where, I made the comment about this game felt like it was 50-0. But at the same time, it really should have been closer than what it was, because the Chicago Bears just gifted away 4 easy points. The offensive lineman doesn't check in and tell the official that he's an eligible player that can catch the ball. Fullback comes in, goes into the huddle, touchdown, Bears. Oh, no, penalty. Next play, holding, field goal. So, as good as the Minnesota Vikings were defensively, some of the credit goes to the Chicago Bears for their terrible execution offensively. And it was just, the Chicago Bears are bad. And they better hope that it changes quickly, because Caleb Williams wasn't looking good. Their execution was terrible. And, they're supposed to be relying on this defense. Well, if your offense isn't putting up any points, it's hard for the defense to be motivated to stop you. So, the Chicago Bears are really just not very good. And, you know what? The Minnesota Vikings escape without injury for the most part. Brian O'Neill came back into the football game, which was huge. And that was one of my takeaways before the game started. I was afraid that the Minnesota Vikings would have something disastrous happen, like an injury to a key player. Almost happened to Sam Darnold. Almost happened to Brian O'Neill, but he came back to play. And now the Minnesota Vikings are 12-2 and head to Seattle, potentially without Geno Smith, who sustained an injury against the Green Bay Packers. And they have a chance to advance to 13-2. And just say that. Just say that to yourself. 13-2 with Sam Darnold. When you say that out loud and you think about it, you meditate on it, all you can do is give appreciation to what Kevin O'Connell and the Minnesota Vikings organization have done this year. Whether that's bringing in free agency guys or execution or play calling, whatever the case may be. And of course, there's luck with injury and everything like that. But it's been a season that's unforgettable. Best start since 1998. It's incredible. 12-2. Good chance to enter 13-2 territory next week. And you control your own destiny when there's another team leading the division that's also 12-2. And the Packers are right, they're 10-4. So the Minnesota Vikings and their season has been absolutely incredible. All right, everyone. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thanks for going on this journey with me. And hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening to podcasts.